Hey guys, I am Game Advisor and welcome back to another Icarus update video. Today is a huge update as we are going to be getting our talent point respecs today. This is something many players have been asking for a very long time, not just in our community, but in the entire Icarus community. I am so glad they're putting this into the game. I think it will breathe some new life into the game that it desperately needs right now. So I'm really excited to talk about how they've actually implemented it, as I think they've done it in a fairly decent way. With that being said, let's get started. Now, the first thing I want to mention is that you will get 30 free respec points upon logging into the game. These are the points that you're going to be using in order to respec your talents and take talent points out so that you can put them into new talent points. I'm very grateful for this, as I think this is their way of saying, hey, we're sorry it took so long. Here's 30 free points. It's for those of you who already put points in that you really wanted to respec that may not be able to afford the cost of it just yet. With that being said, though, the cost really isn't too steep. We're going to go ahead and skip some of this stuff up here as it just kind of encompasses the entire update in its whole, but we're going to talk about some more of the details down here. Now, one of the things they start off by talking about is how to actually respec your character and how to go about it. It's actually very simple. When you go into the game, you can see them doing it right here. You're just going to right click on a talent that you don't want, and then it'll bring up this prompt where you can confirm to remove a talent point. After you remove that talent point, it then gives it back to you, and then you can spend it somewhere else. There are some restrictions with this, like you can't take something out that would mess up the way the talent system works. In other words, if you're trying to take a talent point out up top, that would make it so you can't get the talent you already have down below. It won't allow you to do that, as that would basically be abusing the system. I think that's perfectly fine, and I'm glad they actually thought about doing that, because that's very important for the balance of the game. Now, in order to get those respec points, you're going to have to purchase them with your Ren. In case you didn't know, we now have confirmation 100% that Ren is actually the currency in game, with the big R and the kind of like two dashes through it. I didn't personally actually know this. I always assumed they were called research points until about a week or two ago, so I'm glad that they're confirming it now for us. I do wish they would put something in the game to where maybe if you moused over it, it would just say Ren, like kind of saying, hey, this is what this is called, or maybe have some tutorial when you first boot up the game that says you earn Ren and not just a little R rocket. Like a lot of people called them rocket bucks or research points like we did, or whatever you want to call them, but I just really would like to see some kind of way to tell players, hey, this is what this is called, even if it's only just so that people know what they're talking about when they talk about the currency. In order to get these respec points, you're going to have to spend 150 Ren each on them. Considering we only get about 600 on the highest and longest missions in the game, it's a pretty steep price to pay. That means you're going to be getting 4 talent respec points for doing some of the longest and hardest missions available. Of course, that doesn't apply to hardcore missions, so if you're doing hardcore, it's going to give you a little bit more, but even then you're still only getting 5 or 6 talent respec points at the very most. It may sound like I think this is a bad thing, but actually I think this is a good thing for the game. I think if they give us a reason to want to grind out missions, it's a good thing to have. I think it's at a good balance point right now. 150 sounds like a sound area to me. Only getting 4 or 5 is relatively reasonable. This also encourages us to actually have alternate characters that might be spec'd into different trees for doing different missions. I think this is going to be really valuable as the game expands and it gets DLCs, adds new mission types where maybe you have to grow an absolute metric ton of crops and you can't just run around and pick them up. But at the end of the day, this is a welcome addition to the game. This is something many players have been asking for, and I'm very glad they've added it. In order to help you deal with that extremely high Ren cost for your talent respecs and just for purchasing different items in the actual workshop, they've added in the ability to sell exotics. Right now, it's at a 1:5 ratio. This means if you sell 1 exotic, you would get 5 Ren, or if you sold 1,000 exotics, you would get 5,000 Ren. This is nice because that'll give you a lot of respec points, and I know a lot of players that play this game a lot have gotten to the point where they have an obscene amount of exotics that they just don't know what to do with. There are also missions that will award you with like 100 exotics, which is basically another 500 Ren and another 3 respec points, or it can be used on whatever else you want. It's just another welcome addition to the game. I don't think it was absolutely needed, but I'm definitely glad it's in there. I think this will help with the growth and help the hardcore endgame players that have been putting a lot of time into the game, so I'm very glad they've put it in. After that is really just some crash and stability fixes. I'm not really going to get too into this other than just the fact that we do actually hit the send and close button whenever you get a crash. This is because it sends the crash report to the devs so they know what has crashed your game. If they see a lot of a certain crash report, they can start to implement fixes for that, so don't just ignore them if you are getting crash or other stability issues. If you see an error, just send it in so that the devs can get it fixed and start working on it, because odds are if you're experiencing it, you're probably not the only one. Another major change they've added is the changes to the dropship inventory. This is absolutely amazing. I'm just going to be honest with you. This is probably as big of a deal as adding Respec into the game for me personally, and that's only because going from 10 to now 15 slots in your dropship is absolutely huge. That means you don't have to think, do I bring in my armor or do I bring in those things that give me more move speed? Do I bring in my bow or do I bring in my pickaxe? Which I understand is kind of an interesting meta for the game. I think it gave us an interesting choice of what do we actually value the most that we should be bringing into these missions. And I do want to still have that. I think maybe 15 slots could be too many and too convenient for some players. Maybe restricting like 3 or 4 or even 5 of those to, say, consumables like arrows would be a better method to go about it. That's just my personal opinion. I don't know if that's what you guys think, so let me know down in the comments below if you think that would be a good way to go about it, or you just like it how it is now, or you don't want any extra slots at all and you think we should only have the 10 slots regardless. You do have to remember though, they are probably going to continue to add exotics into the game and you'll eventually start to want to bring more than 15 in. And I do want them to say, you know, at some point there has to be a limit to where if you bring in too many items, it just removes the entire element of having to think about what is most valuable to me on this mission versus what is most valuable that I can just bring in general. Now let's go ahead and talk about the changelog. There is a lot in here and I highly recommend, if you guys have the time, that you go read through this one. There is some big changes that you will want to know about that we just won't have time to cover here today. However, I'm going to try to cover the absolute biggest and most impactful ones for you so that if you don't want to go read through it, you don't have to over worry too much. First up is that they added a weight capacity talent to the exploration tree. This is nice as it gives you another way to carry more items for those missions where you have to grind a lot of ore or other things out. It's just another talent I think was desperately needed to give that tree a little bit more relevance. They've also added an increased stamina regen talent to the repairing tree, which is very good, but I'm going to be honest, I understand why they've put it in the repairing tree, because they want you to be able to quickly repair faster and things like that, and that's why you need more stamina. But I think that somehow they need to implement a way where maybe it only applies if you have a repair hammer or a fire whacker in your hand, rather than just in general. Because personally, I'm going to be taking this talent purely for the fact that I can get, I believe it's 30% stamina regen at just any given time. That's incredibly massive when you have to run across the entire map. And by restricting it to when you only have a repair hammer in your hand or only when you have a fire whacker in your hand, it will help to balance it so that it's being used for the reason the devs want it to be used for. If the devs are okay with that and they think that's balanced either way, then that's fine. But otherwise, I think personally a lot of players are just going to take this just for the run stamina speed regeneration, not so much for the repairing of their building stamina regeneration. Now here it says that they increased the yield of wheat crops by 4 times. Now we are pretty darn sure that what they're talking about here is actually the growing of them in crop plots. Beforehand you would usually only get 3 to 5 per growth, and now we're getting anywhere from 10 to 20. Again, we could be totally wrong on this one, but we are pretty sure that's what they're referencing. It could also be that there's just more wheat growing. It could be that you get more in general, but from our testing, we are 95% sure at this point that what they're talking about is growing wheat within crop plots specifically will give you 4 times as much wheat as it previously would have. They've also changed pumpkin bread so that it now decays at the same rate as other bread items that you craft. This means rather than it spoiling in 800 seconds like a lot of foods will, it'll now spoil in 3600 seconds like all other bread items do. This is how it should have been from the start, and I think it was just a coding mishap or something that was overlooked, but it's another thing just to keep note of that I think is important and you should be aware of. Now there are a lot of other bug fixes in these patch notes. There's also a lot of other small additions they've added to the game. However, we don't have time to cover it in this video. So once again, I highly recommend if you do have the time, go on to Steam, just click on the little update in their news page and it will give you all the details about what's actually going on. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching. I want to give a big shout out to the devs. I'm so glad you guys implemented this into the game. It's something many people in the community have been asking for, and I'm very glad that we have it now available to us. With that being said, I'm still curious as to when we're going to get the alien dog monster thing we saw in the trailer, but hey, that's just me. Anyways, I'm Game Advisor. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.